Cool. All right, so here we are, Joe and Mikhail. We were just going to chat as a follow-up to the WebAssembly for events CI or CI events proof of concept idea. We were tossing around the idea of using WebAssembly in events, in eventing. And so I wanted to actually take a minute to talk about how that relates to Runner, because both of these spaces involve like taking some code and running it. So the sandboxing considerations, there's hosting considerations, but they're still kind of very different. So maybe I could start off by asking a guest appearance.
Yeah, guest appearance.
Yeah. Yeah. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about the eventing or the events work that you're doing and like how the role that you see arbitrary code execution playing, like how it fits in.
I'm not to be clear, I'm not doing any eventing work, but
Tell me more about what you're doing then, or like how'd you get involved?
So at the moment, I'm not involved in any way, apart from like I'm on the group environments team, and we have the deployment or delivery direction, and we need to come up with something to let people deploy their stuff and everything around it. So that might be code execution as a way to deploy something. But then, okay, that's yeah. But then there are so many other things that may benefit from an ability to run a program, basically, or WebAssembly bundle or whatever, execute some code, basically. And at some point, maybe soon, hopefully soon, we will, my group, my team will start working on this. And I think we would also benefit from an ability to run something, you know. So that's how I'm related to this question, but at the moment, not doing any work yet, just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like I don't have concrete requirements, I guess, or like, you know, wishes or anything, but I think in general, democratizing and decoupling a little bit the ability to run stuff, run a program with inputs and outputs, capture the outputs as an API. Actually, a public API would be useful for everybody, not just my team or GitLab. It would be like a platform that GitLab provides to anyone who wants to run compute tasks using shared or their own runners. It can be a paid feature, or it's a free feature, but you pay for runners, let's say, or whatever, you know, something like that.
So there was an attempt to wire Knative into GitLab for providing a serverless environment. How is your proposal different from that?
So it was my team, but previous team before I joined, that did this, as far as I know. How is that different? Well, I don't know much about the Knative effort, but what I'm suggesting is I wrote it up in an issue. I think I linked it from the comment I posted, but like you call an API, say, hey, run this for me, and here are the inputs, and then put the outputs over there, or maybe whatever, somewhere.
Mhm.
I don't know. It's not Knative. I think Knative is like for those events run these things, right? I'm not super familiar with Knative, so maybe not, but that's not what I'm not suggesting to build a serverless platform or anything like that. I'm suggesting to build an API to run programs on runner hosts. It can be WebAssembly, it can be the binary or whatever.
Mhm. Mhm.
WebAssembly is a good choice for, obviously good choice for small tasks.
What's the difference between like the idea of just running something and like AWS Lambda or something similar? Because a Lambda is also like, here, run this thing for me.
I think the idea is that there is a decoupling between the API and where it's executed. So if you build a consumer of that API, you can run your runners wherever you want, in Kubernetes or VMs or whatever. And that's not the same with Lambda, obviously.
So like if like we host it, right? Like if we say, here, run this thing, and we host it, then the user who's asking us to run the thing doesn't really know where it runs. We control that, right? Like it's like a SaaS product. Wouldn't that be quite similar to Lambda? Like I'm trying to understand a little bit more like about how you're thinking about it, because I think there's something that I don't fully understand about your idea.
I guess you could build an API to abstract functions, like abstract lambdas, like different implementations, I mean, and that will be equivalent. We can maybe, well, I think lambdas are usually for short kind of work that is executed really quickly. They start and stop quickly, and I'm not necessarily saying what I'm proposing is for fast tasks like this. That can also work for any size of a job. 1 hour should be okay. 10 hours if the user wants that way. If they configure it that way, if they have the runner that can run for a long time, should be okay.
So you mentioned that you don't have a concrete use case, but I'm kind of curious.
Right now, no. Yeah. But as I said, if you have a look at that issue, and maybe I can, or you can share the screen if you have it open.
Sure.
And then we can put it in the recording basically and discuss that.
Yeah.
Because there are more concrete ideas there in the issue.
Yeah.
But also, in addition to that, maybe we will use it in my group at some point.
Okay, so here is, I'm just getting myself arranged here. All right, here is the this issue. This comment in particular about like not coupled jobs and events. I was kind of interested in drilling in on this a little bit, but you pointed out this one here. Yeah, okay. Mode execution API, yeah, Bazel.
This would make such an API would make GitLab a platform on top of which stuff can be built, and then we can, I don't know, monetize this somehow, or just make it a convenience thing, whatever product wants.
It sounds a lot like serverless, like the idea of just having general hosted compute, App Engine, Lambda, Knative, like whoever you want to run, Cloudflare workers, like there's some various restrictions on like what you can run. Some are like more restricted, like App Engine usually wants you to provide a code in a particular language, but then some versions of it will take a Docker container and sandbox it appropriately, or Knative, works on a container as well. So
Well,
it's
what I had in mind is more like the Bezos remote execution API, which is not specific to Bezos actually. It's just run this thing for me, and here are the inputs, and then you get the outputs.
Yeah, Basil would use this for like caching builds and stuff, like all
For
the
remote execution, yeah, for running build actions.
Cool. This is kind of what Runner does, right? But it's not
But
fast,
but
and
but
it's
it's
not
not,
light.
and it's not available as dedicated separate API without CI jobs. Like it's completely built into everything. It's completely part of CI, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. Even actually pulling this out into an API that we can use, even if it's just within GitLab, makes a lot of sense, because then we can drive parts of GitLab on top of it. Like Grzegorz has talked a lot about that, of course, like we have a workflow
Exactly.
engine and we have a website that uses workflows, like we should be using Runner to drive a lot of the underlying stuff. And so I've also
Yes.
talked quite a bit with Camille about how to take Runner and break it into like something more like GitHub Actions, where you have like specific execution steps, where it can run anywhere. And those might be, each one of those might be a job.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what I'm thinking, basically.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking that currently everybody, like, AI is such a big, powerful hammer, right? And we don't have another hammer. So everybody is putting everything into CI templates, into CI in general. All the features are kind of growing on top of this CI YAML. And maybe if we had a different hammer or yet another hammer, and that's more suitable, that's more versatile, maybe that's the right word, then maybe people could build better features. Like, I don't know, container scanning, maybe it can be as part, like, I don't know, run on a release, let's say. Like, you create a release with artifacts and then they're scanned or something like that. I don't know. Maybe that's too late. Maybe that's a bad example. Like, you should scan them before creating a release. But maybe that's where you have to have a workflow then that artifacts go through, basically. CI produces artifacts, then you scan them, and then, but also maybe you can run scanning additionally, and then maybe you have a separate UI that shows you all the scanning jobs only, and not everything, not all the CI jobs. I don't know, maybe these are bad examples, but that's just off the top of my head.
Yeah, I
But
think, okay.
You can imagine something that can use those APIs.
Yeah, and I think even something as lightweight as just looking at an issue and adding labels. It would be lovely if you could, like, as a user, I have this tool that does a bunch of stuff, and it sort of, if there's something I want to tweak about it, like, like if I want to put some, like almost like you just grab a spot in the UI and it's like, when people click this button, run this code, like that's extremely lightweight, right? And you would want it to execute in like maybe, a few hundred milliseconds after you click it, because people are going to expect results right away. Yeah, so like that's kind of the extreme end. That's what we don't have at all right now. And
which would be very useful. I fully agree. And I mean, I understand that the events idea is a way to trigger CI jobs based on events, and then maybe they are not CI jobs anymore, But then, if they're not CI jobs anymore, why isn't it a chance to rethink how things work on a more fundamental level, rather
Say
than
more
again
about that. What do you mean?
rather than putting everything into CI YAML. Like, if these things are not CI jobs, why are they in CI YAML? Like, maybe we need something else. So I thought about this, and there's another issue that probably is linked to this one. Could you scroll a little bit?
Sure.
Just below.
Oh, I see.
No, okay. Oh, mentioned. Look, that's probably it. Just a little bit more. No, not this one. Stop. And then 1 year ago, I mentioned, what is this issue? In the middle of your screen. No, go back. Please
I'm
go
so
back.
sorry.
Stop above Victor's comment.
There we
No,
go.
above. No,
Oh
no.
no. Above Victor. So here's Victor mentioned in this.
Yeah, this is the issue. Yes. So this is basically, let's build a workflow engine that operates, that allows the user to define a workflow on top of any events that happen in the whole DevOps space, and is triggered by, not triggered, and allows the workflow can manipulate the domain entities of the DevOps domain, and then some implementation ideas. So this is what may or may not have inspired Grzegor's idea about events, and this can build on top of events or something like that. Is related anyway.
Yeah, yeah. What we have in Runner is like kind of like a weird homegrown version of this, where we kind of have this workflow language, but it's like super CI oriented, right? And you could see, so I've had a number of conversations with some engineers like Aaron and Camille about like, how can we evolve the language a little bit to like make it more generic. I think there was the idea that Camille had the idea that some of the steps, like checking out the repo and pulling the cache, should be steps that you add explicitly, or you can override and say, I don't want to do any of that stuff. So It sounds like, like we're all kind of wanting a similar thing, which is to have an underlying workflow engine, like something for like running workflows in general.
So I would say this stuff should be designed in layers. So the fundamental layer is run this bundle and save the output somewhere. Okay. And then on top of that, you can have whatever you want. One of those things can be workflow engine. And on top of that, you can have GitLab events that allows you to describe how, something is executed when something happens in the domain, an issue is created or whatever. And then even more complex things like, okay, your service is above the threshold in errors. Roll back the last deployment that happened recently. Why can't I describe this? It's DevOps domain, it's operations, and I want to automate this. I can't today. I can't, like, don't tell me to put all of that into CI, please.
Yeah.
That makes
integration. I think that core piece that you're pointing out, the execution environment, is really important. And another aspect is like, I think we would want those to be able to also run on the same host in the same environment in a way. Like, for example, if you were to take, the way that GitHub takes sort of a step and has a series of actions, right? Like those actions can be something you take from the library, they could be a shell script, but they all run on the same machine, so you get a lot of locality, right? Like it's we would want to do something similar. Like if you were to take a job, a GitLab job, you should be able to define multiple actions or multiple things that you do to run that job, and you would want those all to happen on the same host.
Yep. But we also don't want side effects leaking through. So if we know the outputs and know the inputs, we can make sure we can do something like Bazel Sandbox, where it creates a trio inputs in a temporary directory and creates symlinks for the actual files, but only those that are expected to be there as inputs. And then you have that boundary that where you have control that nothing else accidentally leaks into your action.
Yeah. Runner does this, but it doesn't do it between the individual steps. I totally agree. Figuring out the inputs and outputs is like the thing that we need to do in order to package it together. Because, like one of them might be run a Docker container. One of them might be like run a JavaScript, function. And you should be able to compose them one after the other. So you have to have a very clear interoperable way of like handing data off from one to the next. I think GitHub, has also a document that you can accumulate data in, which is very helpful.
I don't know about GitHub's actions a lot. I have actually never used them myself.
I haven't either. And it's on my to-do list to go dig into the execution environment to figure out exactly how they sandbox it. What you're describing with Bazel sandboxes is like, one way to do it. I want to kind of like try to figure out like how some prior art for like sandboxing in action. Sounds like you like Bazel.
Yes.
Did you used to work on a team that used Bazel or built Bazel or what?
Used, and I still use it now with the current GitLab project.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I was just looking at Bazel because in the runner team we have a bunch of like integration tests that run they take a long time to run on a single machine. And so we want to sort of distribute them across multiple machines just to speed up our pipeline. And one of our engineers, Aaron, has created this thing that just takes all the tests and hashes them into buckets by how long they take. And everybody does it the same way. And so you just tell the jobs, okay, given that there's 8 buckets, you're taking number 2, number 3, number 4, and everybody just can run the tests and pulls them back. And I was looking at Bazel's, remote execution system to see if it would be a better fit. But ours is just simple and for Golang specifically. So it seemed like a little bit overkill. Maybe. I don't know. You could probably make it work because you're used to using Bazel. But
probably.
Cool. Yeah, I feel like Runner is like this big giant meatball of like functionality, and we've been trying to take pieces out of it, like we've taken one of the things I'm working on right now is taking some of the auto scaling out of it and taking the cloud specific provider specific code out of the configuration into plugins. If we could start to pull some of the the execution environment, the workflow out of Runner and start to break it into pieces. I feel like I keep hearing the same thing everywhere I go. I keep hearing the same thing, but it's kind of hard to figure out like which way to go first, like what pieces to carve out first. I like the idea of using events as a starting point for implementing this real basic execution environment, because we kind of know it's going to have to do all this other stuff, but events are kind of easy because they can be almost like practically stateless, functional, right? You just give it an event and maybe an API, and it calls and does a couple things, like it's pretty, it doesn't have a lot of baggage,
Mhm.
like checking out the repo and exporting all these environment variables and stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for
Yeah.
chatting with me. Thanks for pointing me to this other issue. I'm gonna go reread this and think a little bit more about it. And
Yeah, it may give you more ideas on how the generic API to run jobs can be used. Like, I mean, this issue depends on the other one, basically.
cool. All right, let's keep talking as you keep working on this. I'd be really curious to see where you go with it.
Yeah, we will need to come up with a concrete design on what we want to do. And yeah, I don't know what we will need, but yeah, I think it's good to have a way to like let the user describe what they want, and not only deploy, but then they too, all the operations, all the things that you may be able to or may need to do, and also not just manual clicking buttons, but scripting out the actions and automating all the actions in some cases.
Cool. All right. I think
Thank you very much for
yeah,
organizing.
thanks. Sure. All right. I'll catch you later then.
See you. Bye bye.